It was a crisp autumn morning when Anne Williams carefully adjusted her well-worn beige coat in front of Diamond Crown Jewelers. The storefront sparkled with elegant displays, each piece catching the morning light like stars trapped behind glass. At 72, Anne had learned that appearances could be deceiving, but she never imagined how true that would prove today. The bell chimed softly as she pushed open the heavy glass door. The store's interior was awash in warm lighting, displaying cases of glittering diamonds and precious gems that stretched as far as the eye could see. The air carried a subtle hint of expensive leather and polish, the kind of atmosphere that whispered luxury with every breath. Behind the main counter, Richard Parker, the 45-year-old store manager, was engaged in animated conversation with a young couple. His tailored charcoal suit and perfectly styled silver-streaked hair projected an image of success and authority. Nearby, Emma Thompson, 28, arranged a display of engagement rings, her designer dress and immaculate makeup matching the store's upscale image, and approached the counter quietly, holding her worn leather purse close. Her eyes were drawn to a simple silver locket in one of the cases, perfect for her granddaughter's upcoming 16th birthday. She stood patiently, waiting to be acknowledged. 1 minute passed. Then 5. The young couple finished their purchase. Yet Richard's eyes slid past and as if she were invisible, focusing instead on a well-dressed man who had just entered. "Welcome to Diamond Crown Jewelers." Richard's voice boomed across the store as he greeted the new customer, leaving and standing there, her presence apparently as insignificant as a speck of dust on one of their spotless displays. And cleared her throat gently. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but clear. Emma glanced up briefly, then returned to her task, a slight frown creasing her perfectly made-up face. And tried again, taking a small step closer to the counter. "I'd like to look at that silver locket, please." Richard walked past her, leading the well-dressed man to a private viewing room. As they passed, Anne overheard him whisper, "Let me show you our exclusive collection, sir. Much more suited to your tastes." The emphasis on your felt like a slap across her face. 2 more customers entered, a woman in a designer suit and her teenage daughter. Emma immediately abandoned her display arrangement, rushing to greet them with a dazzling smile. "Looking for something special today?" Her voice dripped with enthusiasm that had been notably absent when Anne tried to get her attention. And stood her ground, though her cheeks burned with embarrassment. She'd saved carefully for this gift, wanting to make her granddaughter's birthday extra special. The locket wasn't even among their most expensive pieces, but they were treating her as if she'd wandered in from the street to waste their time. From the private viewing room, she could hear Richard's polished sales pitch, punctuated by occasional laughter. Near the engagement rings, Emma was regaling the well-dressed mother and daughter with stories about celebrity clients who had recently visited the store. Probably looking for the clearance section, Emma muttered to her coworker, Jason Bennett, 31, as she walked past and again. "Should we tell her Walmart's having a sale?" They both snickered, not bothering to lower their voices enough to prevent Anne from hearing. The words stung more than Anne wanted to admit. She glanced down at her clothing, clean and well-maintained, if not fancy. Her coat had been expensive once, a gift from her late husband 15 years ago. She'd always believed in caring for things properly, making them last. But here, in this temple of luxury and excess, her careful practicality marked her as an outsider. Fighting back tears that threatened to blur her vision, and watched as other customers came and went. Each one was greeted warmly, shown items with enthusiasm, treated like they mattered. After 45 minutes of being systematically ignored, she finally understood that to the staff of Diamond Crown Jewelers, she simply didn't exist. With trembling fingers, she gripped her purse tighter and turned toward the door. As she reached for the handle, she heard Emma's voice behind her, dripping with false concern. "Oh, were you waiting to be helped? So sorry, we've been absolutely swamped today." And paused, her hand on the door. For a moment, she considered turning back, telling them exactly who she was, what she could afford. The lottery ticket that had changed her life 6 months ago had taught her that fortune was fickle. But her mother had always told her that true class wasn't about how much money you had, it was about how you treated others. So instead, Anne straightened her shoulders, held her head high, and walked out without a word. The same bell that had announced her arrival chimed her departure, but this time it seemed to ring with finality. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, a single tear escaped despite her best efforts, quickly wiped away with a handkerchief embroidered with her initials. What the staff of Diamond Crown Jewelers couldn't know, what they hadn't bothered to find out, was that Anne Williams wasn't just any elderly woman in a worn beige coat. And tomorrow, they would learn exactly how wrong they had been to judge her by her appearance. The autumn wind whipped around her as she walked to her car, carrying with it the promise of change. Sometimes, karma needed a little help to teach its lessons. Anne Williams was about to deliver a masterclass in humility to the proud staff of Diamond Crown Jewelers. The next morning dawned bright and clear, but something was different about Diamond Crown Jewelers' usually quiet street. A convoy of gleaming luxury vehicles pulled up outside, 3 black Mercedes-Maybach S-Class sedans and 2 Range Rovers, their polished surfaces reflecting the morning sun like mirrors. The sight was enough to make Richard Parker press his face against the store window, his eyes widening with interest. The first person to step out was Michael Williams, 48, cutting an impressive figure in his bespoke navy suit. As one of the city's most prominent real estate developers, his face regularly graced the covers of business magazines, though he preferred to keep his family life private. Behind him emerged a team of lawyers and architects, each carrying leather portfolios and tablets. Is that Michael Williams?" Emma Thompson whispered, frantically smoothing her dress. The entire staff had gathered near the entrance, drawn by the unexpected spectacle. Richard quickly adjusted his tie, plastering on his most ingratiating smile as he prepared to greet what he assumed would be the most important customer of his career. The bell chimed as Michael entered, his team filing in behind him. Richard rushed forward, hand extended. "Mr. Williams, what an unexpected honor. Welcome to Diamond Crown Jewelers. I'm Richard Parker, the store manager. How may we assist you today?" Michael surveyed the store with an unreadable expression. "Actually, I'm not here to shop." His voice was calm, measured. "I'm here about the building." Richard's smile faltered slightly. "The building?" "Yes. You see, my company has been quietly acquiring properties in this block for the past 6 months. Michael gestured to one of his lawyers, who opened a portfolio. "We're developing a new luxury retail complex, and this is the final property we needed." Emma and the other staff members exchanged uncertain glances as Michael continued. "We've just finalized the purchase from your landlord this morning. But that's not the only reason I'm here." He paused, checking his watch. Right on cue, the bell chimed again. Richard turned, and the color drained from his face. There, in the doorway, stood Anne Williams, the same woman they had so callously ignored yesterday. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood James Chen, 63, owner of Chen's Fine Jewelry, their biggest competitor. "Mom," Michael said warmly, walking over to kiss Anne's cheek. Perfect timing as always. The silence in the store was deafening. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, while Emma seemed to shrink into herself, her face pale with recognition. "Yesterday," Michael continued, his voice taking on an edge, "my mother came in here to look at a silver locket. She recently won $2.3 million in the lottery and wanted to buy something special for her granddaughter, my daughter. But more importantly, she was actually here on my behalf." And stepped forward, her dignity apparent in every move. "I like to help Michael assess the businesses in buildings he's interested in acquiring," she explained softly. "How they treat their customers tells you everything about their values." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Richard began to stammer, "Mrs. Williams, there was a misunderstanding." "Oh, I understood perfectly," Anne replied, her voice gentle but firm. "And so did my son." Michael nodded to another lawyer, who produced a document. "Your lease is up for renewal next month." "We won't be renewing it." He turned to James Chen. "Mr. Chen, on the other hand, has impressed us with his business ethics and commitment to treating all customers with respect. He'll be opening a new flagship store in this location." The news fell like a hammer blow. Richard collapsed into a nearby chair, his perfectly curated image crumbling. Emma looked close to tears, suddenly remembering her cruel jokes about Walmart. But Anne wasn't finished. She walked over to the display case that held the silver locket she'd been interested in yesterday. "It's beautiful," she said, "but I think my granddaughter would prefer something from Mr. Chen's collection. He took the time to show me his entire line yesterday afternoon, after I left here." James Chen stepped forward, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Mrs. Williams has also agreed to be a special advisor for our new store. Her insight into how customers should be treated, regardless of their appearance, will be invaluable." The weight of their mistakes pressed down on the Diamond Crown staff like a physical force. Every dismissive glance, every snide comment, every moment they'd ignored and played back in their minds, now with the devastating knowledge of who she really was. Emma, tears now flowing freely, stepped forward. "Mrs. Williams, I am so sorry. What I said was unforgivable. I don't know what I was thinking," and studied the young woman thoughtfully. Unlike Richard, who was still sputtering excuses, Emma's remorse seemed genuine. Years of experience had taught Anne to recognize true contrition when she saw it. Michael checked his watch again. "We should head to the signing," he said. "The contractors want to begin planning the renovation." As the group turned to leave and paused, the morning sun streaming through the windows caught the silver chain of a necklace she wore, a simple piece, well-loved and well-worn. "You know," she said, addressing the stunned staff, "my late husband bought me this necklace 30 years ago, when we could barely afford groceries. The jeweler treated us like royalty, even though we could only spend a little. He said something I never forgot. Every piece of jewelry carries a story, and every customer carries a dream. You never know which dream might change your life." With those words hanging in the air, Anne Williams walked out of Diamond Crown Jewelers for the second and final time. But this time, she held her head high, not in defiance of humiliation, but in the quiet satisfaction of justice served. Behind her, through the slowly closing door, Emma Thompson buried her face in her hands, while Richard Parker stared blankly at the lease termination notice. They had just learned an expensive lesson about the true value of kindness and the cost of its absence. But karma wasn't quite finished with Diamond Crown Jewelers yet. The next day would bring one final twist that none of them saw coming. The news spread through the city's luxury retail community like wildfire. Diamond Crown Jewelers, once the crown jewel of high-end jewelry stores, was being replaced by Chen and Williams Fine Jewelry, a new venture that promised to revolutionize the industry with its emphasis on inclusive luxury. 1 week after the confrontation, Anne Williams sat in James Chen's office, reviewing applications for their new store. The morning sun filtered through the windows, catching the simple silver necklace she always wore, now a reminder of the values their new business would embody. "This one," Anne said, holding up a familiar resume. "Emma Thompson." James raised an eyebrow. "The same Emma who—" "Yes," Anne nodded. "She's been calling every day, not asking for a job, but asking to apologize again. That tells me something about her character." The door opened and Michael entered, carrying architectural plans. "The contractors say we can begin renovation next week." He paused, noticing Emma's application. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" And smiled, the kind of smile that carried decades of wisdom. "Sometimes, the best way to teach kindness is to show it. Besides," she added, picking up Emma's reference letters, "she's actually highly qualified. She just lost her way in Richard Parker's culture of discrimination." Across town, Richard wasn't faring as well. His attempts to secure a position at other luxury retailers had been met with closed doors. Word of how he'd treated Anne Williams, now a minor celebrity in local business circles, had traveled fast. He'd learned that reputation, once damaged, was far harder to repair than any piece of jewelry. The following day, Emma sat nervously in the interview room of Chen's current store location. Her hands trembled as Anne walked in, followed by James Chen. "Mrs. Williams," Emma began, her voice quavering, "I know I don't deserve a second chance," and held up her hand. "Everyone deserves a second chance, dear. What matters is what you do with it." James Chen leaned forward. "But we need to know, what did you learn from what happened?" Emma took a deep breath, tears welling in her eyes. "I learned that true value isn't about what someone wears or how much they can spend. I became someone I'm not proud of at Diamond Crown, so focused on appearances that I forgot about humanity. That day, watching you leave the store, Mrs. Williams, it changed something in me." Anne and James exchanged knowing looks. "Well then," Anne said, "let's talk about your role as our new assistant manager of customer experience." Emma's head snapped up in surprise. "Assistant manager?" "Yes," James confirmed. "Mrs. Williams believes you understand better than most why our approach needs to be different. Sometimes, the best advocates for change are those who've experienced the need for it firsthand." 3 months later, Chen and Williams Fine Jewelry opened its doors. The store was beautiful, elegant without being intimidating, luxurious yet welcoming. But what really set it apart was its people. Led by Emma's example, the staff was trained to treat every customer like they might be the next and Williams, not because of potential wealth, but because every person deserved to be treated with dignity. On opening day, Anne stood beside Emma, watching as their first customers entered. A young couple, barely in their 20s, tentatively approached the engagement ring display. Emma stepped forward with a warm smile, the same one she used to reserve only for wealthy-looking clients. "Welcome," she said genuinely. "Every piece of jewelry carries a story, and every customer carries a dream. May I help you find yours?" And watched with pride as Emma spent an hour helping the couple find a modest but beautiful ring that fit their budget. The joy on their faces as they left, treated like royalty despite their limited means, was worth more than all the diamonds in the store. Later that evening, as they were closing up, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was Richard Parker, looking considerably humbler than the last time they'd seen him. "We're actually closed," Emma started to say, but Anne moved to unlock the door. Richard stepped in, his expensive suit replaced by casual wear. I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "And I owe you both an apology. The way I ran that store, the culture I created, it was wrong." And listened quietly as Richard continued. "I've taken a job at a small jewelry store in another city. Starting over at the bottom. I want to learn to do it right this time." After he left, Emma turned to Anne. "Do you think he really changed?" Anne touched her silver necklace thoughtfully. "Time will tell. But change has to start somewhere. Sometimes it starts with a humble store manager, sometimes with a young sales associate who learns to see beyond appearances." She smiled at Emma. "And sometimes it starts with an elderly woman in a worn beige coat, carrying both a lottery ticket and a lesson about dignity in her pocket." That evening, as Anne locked up their new store, she glanced at the sign, "Chen and Williams Fine Jewelry, where every dream matters." Below it, engraved in smaller letters, was their motto, "Never judge a story by its cover." The store had become more than just a business. It was a daily reminder that karma works in mysterious ways, and sometimes the best revenge is showing others a better way forward. As for the silver locket that started it all, it sat in a special display case, not for sale but as a reminder that the most valuable things in life aren't the jewels we wear, but the humanity we show to others.